As a senior in high school, I wasn't sure what I really wanted to do. I was kind of divided between basketball and football, and I think my father at the time really thought I was going. I remember a conversation we had in the car one day, and I can't remember where it come from, but it kind of sticks in my mind that he just knew. I said that I had made up my mind that I knew where I was going to go, and he goes, I already know too. And he thought I was taking the easy road out and going to go play basketball. And I had already made up my mind to go to Notre Dame at that point.
From where we come in Pennsylvania, I mean, everybody wanted to go to Notre Dame. I mean, it was that tradition in that part of the country. And anytime we went out on Saturdays, we always turned on the Notre Dame game. Then on Sunday morning, we get up early in the morning so we could watch the replays on television. So he was probably brainwashed at an early age. I don't even remember how I even got started on Notre Dame. I really liked the team. It was almost like a religion. I couldn't do anything until I watched the game Saturday or Sunday if they were on. Later on in the action, Notre Dame has to punt.
Joe knew that Notre Dame tradition went beyond Lindsey Nelson's tape-delayed television broadcasts. Any freshman football player new to South Bend couldn't help getting caught up in the lore and legend of Rockne and Hornung, and in recent years, of Joe Theismann and Pennsylvania product Terry Hanratty, one of Joe's idols. But when Joe Montana began at Notre Dame, he quickly learned that he was just one of many with the same goal.
When I got to Notre Dame, you know, as a freshman, you always have these illusions of grandeur in your mind that things are going to be a lot better than they really are. And when I got there, I was in shock that there were 7 other freshman quarterbacks on the team.
At first, as a freshman, he didn't stand out much more than anybody else, and there were actually 2 other freshman quarterbacks that were higher rated than he was as freshmen.
After a disappointing freshman campaign, Joe began his sophomore season as a backup quarterback. But thanks to 7 comeback victories in 3 years, Montana left a legacy of his own for the record books at Notre Dame.
It was early in the season and hotter than the son of a gun. We were in no position to make a rally.
With just over 6 minutes left in the game, Montana completed 3 of 4 passes for 129 yards and a touchdown.
Well, certainly that was Joe's big entrance into college football, and what really got him a lot of notoriety as far as his ability to come in and make a big comeback game for the University of Notre Dame. That was the first indication that he had the ability to be a great quarterback. Everyone knew that he had some inner confidence, but that was the first time he was able to actually demonstrate it on the field.
I recall how impressed the North Carolina people were with Joe's performance. I was too.
Notre Dame Athletic Director Moose Krause called the game the greatest comeback in Notre Dame history. But a week later, Joe found himself coming off the bench again.
Usually in my position, you got to play in one of 2 ways. Either you were way ahead or you were way behind. And this happened to be the case. We were way behind.
The Air Force game was the turning point, I think, as far as the indication as to who should be quarterback.
With a season-high 134 yards passing, Joe engineered 3 scoring drives and established himself as a relief quarterback.
If you're wanting to be in the position, oh yeah, I can't wait to have the ball, but then when you get in the position, you don't do anything with it. It's probably worse.
In his junior year, Joe again started the season on the bench, but was called upon against Purdue. The comeback kid responded with 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns and seemed to win more allies in his battle to secure the starting job.
You know, I'm not afraid to be in the position. I don't want to be here, but I'm not afraid of it. I don't jump up and down, yeah, I can't wait, now look what I can do because I'm in this position. And I think that's what guys like to see.
That was ultimately the turning point of our whole season that year, and that allowed us to win the national championship. As you know, Joe came in that year, and we never lost another game during that season, and went on to win the national championship.
Joe's junior year turned out to be a banner season for the Fighting Irish. Not only did Montana start the remaining 9 games for Notre Dame, but it was also a season that saw Coach Dan Devine bring out the green uniforms for the rivalry against USC. Under Montana, Notre Dame continued to move up in the national rankings. But it took more heroics against Clemson to keep the Irish bid for a national title alive. Undefeated in 5 previous starts, Joe led the Irish into Death Valley for their game against 15th-ranked Clemson.
He was just an individual that came on the field. You knew what his physical abilities were, and everyone played up and beyond, I think, their physical abilities due to his leadership.
Although he hit on only 9 of 21 passes, Montana rushed for 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns to lead the Irish past the Tigers.
There's no doubt in my mind about the ability of the other guys, and I think in return you get the same from them.
Riding a 9-game winning streak, the Irish were ranked 5th when they arrived in Dallas for the 1978 Cotton Bowl against top-ranked Texas. For many of the Notre Dame players, this was their first bowl game, as well as a chance for a first national championship under Coach Dan Devine. Needless to say, this was the bowl game of New Year's Day.
The thing that sticks out in my mind in that game was initially early on in the game, you knew what kind of game it was going to be. Is every night before the games, they would freshly paint our helmets, and our helmets had been painted. And Ricky Churchman hit Jerome Heavens, and all I remember seeing in the sunlight was just this gold dust flying through the air and just sparkling everywhere. And the paint had just shattered. I mean, just come in tiny pieces all over the place, and you're going, it's going to be a long day. But
Texas was the favorite at kickoff. The Longhorns had both the Heisman Trophy winner in Earl Campbell and the Outland Award winner in Brad Shearer on the field. Yet, with one of the nation's top offensive units, Texas had trouble moving the football against the Irish, due in part to the play of linebacker Bob Golick.
Our defense played great. Bob Golick, probably played one of his greatest games ever as a middle linebacker. It was like 2 bulls meeting in the field at full speed, and Bob ended up winning the battle in the long run.
I think the most special thing about that game was that Texas was the only undefeated team in the country at that time.
With the Irish defense having met the challenge of the Longhorns, the offense now turned to Joe Montana to lead them to a national championship. Montana replied with a balanced attack. Jerome Heavens and Vegas Ferguson each ran for over 100 yards, and Terry Urick scored a pair of touchdowns.
great feeling, I think, because it was one of those years that we had a great defense and we had a good offense. The majority of guys who go through college and even on great football schools don't have an opportunity to win a championship, and so it's something that you can always look back on and be proud of as a member of that team.
With his senior year still remaining, Joe saved some of his best for last. With the team off to a slow 2-2 start, Montana turned a 17-7 deficit against Pittsburgh into comeback victory number 5, passing for 218 yards and 2 touchdowns, most of it taking place in the game's final 13 minutes. The Los Angeles Coliseum was the site of Joe's last regular season game as a member of the Fighting Irish, as Notre Dame and USC renewed their famous rivalry. With just under 13 minutes remaining, the Irish began the rally from a 24-6 deficit with a passing attack led by Joe Montana. Again and again in the fourth quarter, Joe went to his favorite receiver, Chris Haynes, as he piled up career highs in passing yardage, passes attempted, and completed. Montana rang up 358 yards and 2 touchdowns and had the Irish up 25-24 before USC ultimately prevailed with a last-minute field goal.
I think the wind chill was down to like 30 below, or I mean, it was just something just really atrocious to play football in. And the field had been covered with like 2 inches of ice. We were warming up and this golf cart's going back and forth all around the field. And we're going, what the heck's this guy doing? He's throwing rock salt on the pieces of ice that were left. I mean, I was one scab on both my arms, probably from my elbow halfway up my wrist, on both elbows, and on my knees. They had to cut my pants and my jersey off. You know, everybody wanted to win it, but everybody was looking at the clock, stay in bounds, you know. Oh, don't go out of bounds. What is that guy doing?
For most of the first half against Houston, it looked as though Joe Montana's final game as a member of the Fighting Irish might just slip away without the familiar Montana magic. Notre Dame squandered a 12-point lead, and the Irish simply couldn't hold on to the ball for most of the game. Trailing 34-12 midway through the final quarter, the Irish began their comeback. Playing with hypothermia, Joe spent the second half shuttling between the field and the locker room, where the medical staff fed him chicken bouillon between possessions. Thus, this game became known to many as the Chicken Soup Bowl. And now, with the wind at their backs, the Irish put their first points on the board since the first quarter. Montana and Haynes teamed for a final drive that took Notre Dame to the Houston 8-yard line and set up one of the most unique endings to a college career.
It's kind of a unique kind of thing that happened, too, is we ended up throwing this pass, and I missed it the first time, so I wanted to run it again, and I ended up signaling back, and he said, okay, run it. And so we ran again, and we throw the ball down low and away in hopes that we might have another play, but Chris Haynes makes a great catch in the corner of the end zone for the touchdown.
Although the national championship didn't hang in the balance as it had at the previous year's Cotton Bowl, This New Year's Day victory, or comeback number 7 as many Notre Dame alumni refer to it, almost seemed to count for more. What it did was to close out the college career of Joe Montana, one that saw him finish as Notre Dame's 3rd leading passer behind Joe Theismann and childhood idol Terry Hanratty. And although he finished among impressive company, it hit home that his football career was once again in someone else's hands.
That's when I sat there and thought about it, that it was over, and then you start wondering about your career. I had graduated in December, so I was finished completely. And you start wondering what you're going to do, where you're going to go, and looking forward to the Hula Bowl, and then on to Japan. And start worrying about your career at that point.